Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to have you here. We are going to spend the next hour or so doing an update on stress and brain development in young children. For those of you who have been through the 2-day Better Brains for Babies training, a lot of this will be review to you because this is the same kind of content that you get during that 2-day training, but some of you who have been through Better Brains for Babies training may have been through it a long time ago. Some of you may need a review. And certainly at the end, for everybody, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how does this affect your job? The understanding stress, understanding how stress affects the brain, how does this affect the work that you do in Extension? Whether or not you're actually teaching directly about stress and brain development, there are things that understanding these concepts may help you do as an Extension agent. So I'm glad you're here. I very much welcome questions as we go along, and certainly we'll pause for questions and comments a number of times. If you have a microphone, if you will raise your hand, so that I know that you have something you want to say. You're certainly welcome to type responses in the chat box. A lot of you are familiar with that. And I may ask for check mark X kinds of responses as well. So I want to start out by showing you the session objectives. Look at that. It is advancing. So our objectives today really focus around stress, understanding how the brain responds to stress. This is a biological process that happens in all of us whenever we encounter stress. And so understanding what that process is about is the first step in understanding how you support children under stress. We're going to look at 3 different levels of stress. For some of you, these are familiar. For some, these may be new. We're going to talk about the potential negative effects of long-term toxic kinds of stress. So those high-level chronic kinds of stress and the potential negative effects. But then we're going to end as well on a positive note, talking about ways that adults can buffer the developing brain from toxic stress. So it's not all bad news that if children are experiencing stress, then, oh well, there's nothing we can do for them. There is a lot that adults can do to support children under stress. And that goes for parents, that goes for child care providers, that goes for teachers, that goes for Extension agents, especially those of you in 4-H. If you're working with children and youth who are experiencing stress, you may be that person in that child's or that teenager's life to help support them through stress. So any questions about where we're going today? If not, I'm going to go ahead and get started because an hour is honestly not a lot of time. And what I want to do first is actually have you quickly brainstorm with me what stress is. When you signed up for a session on stress and brain development, what do you think of when you think of stress? If you will type your responses in the chat box, or if you have ideas that you want to share out loud and you have a microphone, feel free to do that. Anxiety, feeling out of control. Food is a source of stress. Anxiety, headaches, mental, emotional strain. Anything that pushes a response from the body. Yeah, so it's something that your body responds to. Restlessness, tiredness, exhaustion, mental strain, emotional strain, all of those are often symptoms of stress. Tension in your neck, in your shoulders, in your back. Abuse, which is one very common cause of stress. Headaches. I don't know about the rest of you. That's one of my signs of stress. Anger. So lots and lots of signs. What do you think actually causes, or what do you think is going on when you're under stress? Give you just a second to respond. Cortisol production, absolutely, Terry. We're going to talk about that. Your body is responding. I want to give Lisa It provides wear on your body. It's hard physically on your body when you are under stress. And this can be physical stress, the stress of being ill, the stress of fighting an infection, but certainly it can be emotional stress as well. And so when we're talking about stress, we're talking about anything that's different in your life, anything that upsets or threatens the normal balance in your body. We live in bodies that very much want to maintain equilibrium, to stay the same, to not deal with things that are different or things that change. So anything that's out of the ordinary is a source of stress. And that can be something that's very positive, having a baby, getting married, any of those kinds of things, starting a new job, taking on new responsibilities at work, going to 4-H camp. Any of those kinds of things can be sources of stress, even if and even during time that they are enjoyable. So let's take a look quickly, and I want to give you a chance to try and identify some stresses that a child may be facing. So this is kind of a long example. I will read it, but certainly you can read along as well. I don't know how good some of your screens are. So we're looking at Grace, who's 2 years old. Excuse me. And Grace lives with her mom and 3 older siblings. Her mom is a single parent who works 2 jobs, and so Grace is cared for by her 8-year-old sister while her mom's at her night job. Grace's mom has no time to cook. There are no planned meals. There's usually food in the refrigerator, mostly snack-type items, sodas, chips, cereal, canned spaghetti, peanut butter crackers, canned fruit, cheese. Grace is not able to open the refrigerator or cabinet doors to get to the food. She's only 2. And sometimes others are too busy to help her right away when she's hungry. So what kinds of stress or what sources of stress do you see here in Grace's life? Inconsistency. Terry gave us 3 good ones. Inconsistency, hunger, of course. Helplessness, the fact that you can't do things for yourself and you're dependent on others. Food insecurity. Keyshawn, lack of safety, absolutely. Or potential lack of safety. There are concerns, of course, about an 8-year-old's ability to care for a 2-year-old. Potential lack of attachment, lack of attention. Other thoughts? Lack of safety, yes. Lack of affection. A lot of emotional stress, a lot of uncertainty in this child's life, in this child's family. If mom is working 2 jobs, we can probably extrapolate that there's some poverty going on here. Or an attempt to get out of poverty by working multiple jobs. So all of the stresses that go with that are issues as well. So lack of supervision, lack of stability, physical pain, hunger, lots of possible things going on. Remember this example. We're going to go back to this after we take a quick look at some things that we know about the brain. And it's important to start out by remembering the foundations of brain development. Any of you who have been through any of the classes I've done on brains know these things, but it's worth reminding you. First of all, the brain is important because it is not well developed at birth. And so a child's experiences from prenatally all the way up through adolescence actually affect the wiring and the development of the brain. So the process of brain development is a very long one, and the environments that children grow up in make a big difference as far as their brains. We also know a lot of important things happen before age 3, so those youngest children are of great concern when it comes to brain development. We want to make sure that they have the positive and nurturing experiences they do. We know that brains are built on relationships. Those interactions with nurturing adults make a difference. And then we know that sensory experiences matter as well. So the brain is a living, growing organ throughout all of childhood and adolescence. And the experiences that children have, the experiences that teens have, make a difference in terms of brain development. And there's a particular part of the brain where we are most concerned about development, especially during early childhood. Because this is the time when brain development is happening rapidly, but it's not well developed yet. We particularly want to pay attention to this section that I just drew the yellow circle around called the limbic system. The limbic system is the emotional center of the brain, and its job is to be the primary processor of anything that has any kind of emotion attached to it, which is honestly most of our experiences. There are very few things that go on in life that don't have some emotion. We're either happy, or we're tired, or we're stressed, or we're upset, or we're excited. Those emotions drive a lot of what happens. So in young children especially, the limbic system is already well developed by the time a child is born, and it is responding to emotional things in the child's life. And there are two parts of the limbic system, the amygdala and the hippocampus, that work together to remember and pay attention to and learn from emotional experiences. And so young children especially are guided primarily by emotion. And so the part of the brain that we call the cerebral cortex, the outermost layers of the brain, are not yet well developed in young children. And these are the parts that handle all of the abilities that have to do with academic skills, all of the abilities that have to do with careful thinking skills, the planning, reasoning, judgment, decision-making. All of those things start developing in infancy, but continue developing throughout adolescence. Those of you who work with 4-Hers certainly know that teenagers don't have well-developed senses of reasoning and logic and decision-making and all of those kinds of things until much later in development. So this emotional center, this limbic system, is in control of most of the child's experiences. And so what that means when a child is under stress is that the emotion that goes with a stressful experience has some powerful effects. So let's talk about what happens in the brain whenever we experience stress. And the example I always use talking about the stress response is being in a near miss in your car. How many of you have had that kind of an experience? Give me a check if you have, X if you have not. Where you've almost hit another car, a tree, a deer, any of those kinds of things, or you've been with somebody driving who has almost hit something but not quite. All right, looks like most of you know what I'm talking about. I want you to take just a second and remember that experience. Think about it. How did it feel? How did you feel when you experienced it? And so on. Because what happens during that experience, during that time when you're under stress, is a basic kind of response that we call the stress response. And so the body and the brain is set up to deal with this stress, and that is the most important thing that the body and the brain is doing. Yes, Susan, you're right. Instinct is kicking in. So as soon as you perceive that something stressful is happening, your whole body goes on high alert, and this is an automatic thing. This is not something you have to sit around and think about whether this is something that I'm supposed to do. This happens automatically. So the body and the brain releases massive amounts of the stress hormone cortisol, and that sets up a stress response. And so your body is primed to deal with that stress and nothing else. You're not sitting around thinking about what you need to do at work the next day. All you're trying to do is to not hit that car in front of you. So your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your body's flooded with adrenaline, your hands may start shaking, and your attention is very highly focused. Now, this stress response is a good thing under certain circumstances. This is a response that helps you to deal with stress, and it helps you to get through that stressful situation, hopefully safely. The challenge comes for children, and adults for that matter, but particularly for children, when these stressful situations don't last very long. If you think about how long that near miss in the car takes, it's very brief. In a few seconds, you've either hit the car in front of you or you haven't, and in either case, that stressful situation is over. So we worry about children when they are dealing with this stress response over and over all day long for long periods of time. So we know that not all stressors are created equal. And there are 3 different levels of stress that children and adults may experience. The first one we call positive stress. Now, it's not positive stress because it's enjoyable or because it's something that we have a good time with or we're glad that we're experiencing. It's called positive stress because it helps us learn how to cope. These are the little everyday things. Does anybody have an example of a positive stress, a positive stressor that you dealt with today? Something that didn't go quite as expected. While you all are typing, one of my examples, I taught a 1-hour class for senior 4-H campers today, and I got over to the room and everything was working out fine, and 5 minutes before they arrived I realized, you know, they're not going to come with pencils to write down their answers, so I had to go scrounge up a bunch of pencils for them to use 5 minutes before the class. Technology, yes, I understand that, especially when it does not work as planned. Any other examples of little stresses? Your clothes, the clothes you wanted to wear today weren't clean. Your kid wouldn't get ready to leave the house when they needed to. Your car wouldn't start. You had an unexpected event at work. Slow response to email. Terry says having a toddler, which is a kind of an exercise in dealing with lots of stress. Remembering how to do entering data for a coworker who's on maternity leave and remembering how to do that. Your spouse driving you crazy. A slow car in front of you on the way to work. These are exactly the kinds of things I'm talking about. These are the short-term things, and they're good news in some sense for the brain because they coach the brain and they help you to learn how to deal when things don't go right. And so these little everyday stresses for children, if you can imagine not getting a cookie when you want one right before dinner, or somebody stealing your favorite toy, or not doing well on a test in school, those kinds of things are likely positive stresses. They're short, they're stressful while you deal with them, but they help you learn how to cope. The other 2 levels of stress are these more long-term chronic ones that we are more concerned about when they happen to children. One we call tolerable stress, the other we call toxic stress. These are typically caused by much more long-term kinds of experiences, and they are either tolerable or toxic, depending in part on whether the child has support to deal with them. So things like abuse at home, witnessing domestic violence, food insecurity, hunger, homelessness, other kinds of stressors and insecurities that go with long-term poverty. All of those kinds of things, the death of a close family member, if you're in the military, having a family member deployed, these kinds of things raise your stress level for longer periods of time. And what we want is for children to have, for these kinds of stressors to be tolerable because the child has people that help support them and get through them. What we worry about is when children have toxic stressors where this level of stress is not managed and the child doesn't have anybody to help them cope. So what I want to do next is to show you, if this is going to work, to show you a video clip from the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University. This is about a 2-minute video clip about how toxic stress derails healthy development. I'm going to see if I can get this to pull up, so give me just a second. All right, hopefully you can now see this. I'm going to let it play. Can you see this on your screen? Ah. Okay, you all are not hearing the sound on the video? Okay, that's unfortunate. I'm not sure what to do. What I will do is give you all the link to watch this video yourselves later on, because this is an excellent, very short video. In fact, I'm going to paste it now into the chat room. Yes, Susan, I stopped it intentionally because I was concerned if you all couldn't see it that it was not helpful. I have pasted the link, and I'll also email you the link afterward. I apologize. Sometimes this sharing works really well, and sometimes it does not. So I apologize that this did not seem to work this time. So in any case, we know that stress is a concern because it does derail healthy development. And so, so children who are under stress have a lot of challenges because their body never has an opportunity to let go of this stress response and move on and deal with things without being under so much stress. And so it is a concern when children experience toxic stress. So I want to go back to our example, and let's talk a little bit, now that you understand what the 3 levels of stress are, let's talk a little bit about what happens or what kinds of stressors Grace here might be dealing with. So what kinds of things do you see in Grace's experience here that might possibly be positive stressors? In other words, those little short-term stressors that are annoying but not necessarily things that are going to have long-term negative effects on her development. Food is available, so that's a good thing. The fact that she can't get the food immediately, I would call probably a short-term stressor, unless it's the amount of time she has to wait is crazy. Yes, Terry says she does have help, just not necessarily immediately. So she does have to wait, but hopefully not for hours and hours and hours when she's hungry. Anything else you see that might be stress, might be a more positive stress? She's not alone, so she does have someone caring for her. And in a previous example here, and I don't think I said this in this example, but in a previous version of this, there was a statement about her aunt also coming in sometimes to take care of them at night. So having that stability on the days that the aunt's there, even if she's not there all the time, could be helpful as well. What about potential tolerable or toxic stressors? The kinds of long-term things that that might have those long-term effects on the brain. What kinds of things do you see? Let me go back to the example so you can see the specifics. Poverty for sure. Mom's not there at night. The potential safety risks that go with that are a big issue. Also think about this mom herself. How do you think she's feeling? Dealing with 2 jobs, working a night job, leaving the kids at home alone. Not a lot of healthy food, absolutely, Terry. Some canned fruit, some cheese maybe. A single parent, Not that if any of you are single parents or know people who are single parents, there are plenty of single parents who do an outstanding job of caring for their children. It's not intended to be an indictment of single parents, but it is easier when there is more than one parent in the home, or a parent, if there is a parent and a grandparent, if there's more than one person to manage what's going on. Lack of routines is a big issue, yes, because there's a lot of stress that goes with that instability. Limited time with the parent. If mom's working 2 jobs, one during the day, one at night, Grace and her siblings probably do not see her very much. Also think about the fact if the 8-year-old is the one left at home with Grace while mom works, there are probably 2 other siblings as well who are somewhere between Grace's age and the age of this 8-year-old. So this is a bunch of young children who are being left to care for themselves. So some potential stressors: the parent who works 2 jobs, being cared for by the 8-year-old, poor nutrition, not having needs met, irregular eating schedules, lots and lots of pressure on that child. And Terry also mentions no evidence of positive stimulation to help develop the brain. And an 8-year-old is not going to probably be equipped to provide much of that. So you're likely right, Terry, that she's not getting the kinds of conversation and reading and new experiences and those kinds of things. So this is a family under some pretty substantial stress. What I'm wondering from you all, what do you think could help make these stressors more tolerable rather than toxic? Some of these things probably can't be eliminated, or if we're imagining that we're trying to help this family, they're not things that we have the power to change. We're not going to be able necessarily to just magically increase the family's income so that Grace's mom only has to work 1 job. What could be provided? What are the kinds of things that if we were running a program to help this family that we might be able to help provide to make these stressors more tolerable? Mentors, absolutely, Tammy. Somebody to help work with the mom, somebody to help work with the older sibling, to help them understand how to provide what the kids need. Healthy snacks, information about healthy snacks, and maybe even some ideas of things that the 8-year-old could prepare that are simple, things that could be brought in that are easy, that are a little healthier than the peanut butter crackers and things that are currently available. What else? What else could help make these stressors more tolerable? The big one that I would hope that, yes, an older caregiver, Susan, the big one that I would hope that Grace and her siblings would get is some older, more responsible, more mature person to be caregiver and also nurturer. Because having a person that you know cares for you and you can trust, it goes as sorry about that, I had to stifle a cough. Having somebody that you can trust and that nurtures you does as much to make stressors more tolerable as just about anything that we can provide. And so somebody to be there to provide that stability, whether it's an aunt or a neighbor or somebody from down the street or somebody from church or any or other faith community, anything like that would make a big difference in terms of Grace's life. So let's look at some of the challenges and dangers that come from prolonged stress, because this is really where we worry about especially children whose stress is toxic, who don't have those supports, who don't have that help, and who are in this state of arousal all the time. So remember, when you're under stress, your stress system is activated, you have a lot of cortisol, you're always on high alert. And so what children don't have are good ways to learn a lot of these higher order thinking skills. The reasoning, planning, judgment, problem solving, decision making, getting along with others, all of those things tend to be suppressed, and children don't develop them because they're spending their whole lives just trying to survive the stress that their brain tells them they are experiencing. So those parts of the cerebral cortex are less well developed. And over time, that can make a big difference in the child's behavior, the child's ability to cope with school, to get along with friends, eventually to get a job, to succeed in family life. All of those things may be affected. So we see a lot of kids who are in long-term prolonged stress who are always in survival mode. They have a dominance of their survival instincts, and they're often highly aroused at all times. Now, this physical arousal is what comes with stress, the stress response, but if you never have a chance for that stress response to be relieved, what happens is you often have a hair-trigger temper. And so a child may misinterpret what is an innocent look or brush or something from another child as a threat, because the brain is already alerted to be ready for and to protect against threats. So you may see children who seem to be aggressive for no reason, who react very quickly without thinking, who get into fights, who get into arguments, who hit and bite and those kinds of things, because they are under so much stress that their brain cannot cope. These are the children that tend to look very impulsive. They're not able to sit still. They're not able to learn. This is not to say that things like ADD and ADHD don't exist, because they certainly do. But some of the children that we think have ADD may be showing us behavioral symptoms that they are under so much stress that they can't cope any longer. And so it may be a situational kind of thing rather than a longer-term kind of disorder like ADD. And children have, over time, a reduced ability to learn, which of course is a big issue and a big challenge throughout life. Again, I promised that there would be some good news, and I promised that to point out some things that you can do, some ways that you can help to support kids who are dealing with high levels of stress. So when we talk about children under stress, we talk about factors that mitigate stress. Most of us, particularly if you're working with children and families in a professional role, are not in a position where we can eliminate all sources of stress. We can't necessarily find the parent a job, get the parent a better education, increase income, make the housing stable, make sure that appropriate amounts of healthy food are provided. Those kinds of things are often not in our control as professionals working with children. So what we're trying to do are to provide other kinds of things that help reduce those potentially toxic stressors to more tolerable levels. And the first one I've already mentioned, but it is probably the most crucially important, and that is having at least one loving, responsive, consistent relationship with an adult. If you look for just a second at the photo on this slide, this is one of my favorite photos. What do you see as you look at this father and this baby? What do you notice about them? Eye contact, absolutely. He's looking at her, and she's very clearly looking at him as well. There's clearly a connection going on. Without hearing any sound, without any kind of video to support this, you can tell that there is a connection going on. There's communication. Again, whether the dad and the baby are making any sounds or not, there is communication going on non-verbally. They look happy. They look calm. How would you describe this baby's feeling right now in this picture? Content, secure, safe, Happy, pleasurable, absolutely. She's paying careful attention. You can tell from this facial expression that that she knows that this person is special. Now, whether she has a fully developed attachment to this dad yet or not depends to some degree on how old she is, but clearly there is a connection there. If this baby is later on feeling stress, who is she going to turn to help her get through and deal with this stressful kind of situation? You can tell from the look that she's giving him that she's going to turn to dad. She's going to turn to this important adult in her life. And so hopefully every child has at least one adult who is providing this kind of loving, responsive, consistent relationship. And of course we hope that that person or those people are the child's parents or primary caregivers. But if they're not, if those parents are abusive, if they are neglectful, if they are so overwhelmed with their own stress that they cannot provide that kind of nurturing, if the parent is depressed and can't provide that nurturing, having some other adult in the child's life who is there and consistent and available and responsive makes a huge difference in terms of making those stress levels much more tolerable for that child. So for some of you, you may be that person in the life of a child who's not your own child. You may be the one that they know they can count on, the one who spends the time with them. And so that's a crucially important component. Safe environments are equally important, especially for children who are living in a violent community, who are witnessing violence in their home, or who are being abused themselves. Knowing that there is a place you go where you are always safe, where nothing is going to happen to harm you during the time you're there is very important. For some children, that may be school or child care. For some children, again, it may be their church or other faith community. It may be when they're at a sports practice or dance practice or scouts or 4-H or whatever else they do, but there's a place where they know they're safe. That gives them a chance for that stress response to wind down for a period of time so they have some relief from that stress. So even if they're going back into the stressful environment later on, they've had an opportunity for that stress, the stress response to not be activated for a while. The third one is one that is important to provide to children starting in early childhood, and that's giving children the chance and the experience with dealing with their own positive stresses in a supportive environment. There are children growing up today, unfortunately, who have never had to deal with any kind of stress in their lives. When something goes wrong, the adult immediately fixes it. Mom or dad fixes it, or grandma fixes it. If they forget their lunch, what does mom or dad do? They take the lunch to school for them. If they get a bad grade on a test in 5th grade, mom or dad goes and talks to the teacher and gets the grade changed. And these are the kids who absolutely have the most difficulty dealing with those more challenging stresses, whether they first experience them when they're in preschool or elementary school or high school or in college. We see kids who have never had a chance to deal with stress by themselves come to UGA and absolutely fall apart. It may be over a grade in a class that they don't expect. It may be over having to do their laundry for the first time, or having to manage money and not knowing what happens if I run out of money before the month is over. So providing opportunities all along in a child's life to help them deal with stress and make choices and deal with things not going as planned is an important way to mitigate stress. And this starts very early with giving children very simple choices, letting them pick from 2 foods, from 2 shirts, from 2 pairs of shoes, from 2 activities, so that they can understand and deal with the kinds of choices that come in life. That is putting them on the road to dealing with stress as they get older. The other 2 things, the development of trust is something that happens over time with these loving, responsive, and consistent relationships. Babies and children learn over time that having these consistent people means that they're going to be taken care of, that there is going to be someone who helps feed me, who takes care of me when I'm hurt, takes care of me when I'm sick. And that helps children to have confidence to deal with the stressors that come up. And then there is a quality that we call resiliency. It is at least partially an internal quality that we're all born with to some degree. It's also a quality that can be nurtured and supported by a lot of external things, like loving relationships and safe environments. And this is the ability to go on, to cope, to handle things when they're not going well. So all of these things can help children who are under stress. And one of the most important, of course, are responsive adults. Those adults who are not just physically present, but also emotionally available. And they're providing that love, that consistent response for the children. And they're sensitive to children's needs, to children's feelings, to children's preferences. This doesn't necessarily mean that they do things all of the time just because the child wants them, but they recognize that even the youngest children have their own personalities, their own likes and dislikes, and their own preferences. We're talking about adults who provide children opportunities to explore. Strapping a baby into a car seat, a swing, a bouncy seat, a high chair all day, every day is not being a responsive adult, because that limits the child's ability to explore. It may keep them safe from physical harm, but it actually, over the long term, does emotional harm, because the child is not able to have new experiences and to develop that confidence and to develop those connections in the brain that help them to deal with stressors later on. So creating a safe environment, creating appropriate limits and guidance, and then giving children opportunities to explore within those limits is important. So is positive guidance, teaching children what they should do and what appropriate behavior looks like, in addition to teaching them what they shouldn't do. Respecting children's feelings, and then also being consistent and responding in the same way every time. I want to talk for just a second about what happens when adults are not responsive. And this is another video segment that I would love to play, except that I don't trust the player to work. So I will give you this link as well. But what this video is about, many of you may have seen this. This is the still face video that is an experiment done by a researcher named Edward Tronick. And what he did here was to see what happened and how babies responded when adults did not interact with them. So this baby first sees mom or dad smiling, laughing, pointing, interacting, and so on. And then mom or dad does not respond. And babies quickly recognize this, know that this isn't how things are supposed to be, and feel and show a massive amount of stress. Again, if you've not seen this still face video, I would strongly recommend that you take a look at it. I've given you the link here in the chat box, and I will also email that link to you as well. So talking about consistency, one of the questions I often ask as we're talking about consistency and how it minimizes stress, I want you to think about your own first day of some school. For some of you, you may be able to remember back to your first day of kindergarten. Some of us have been around a while and that day is kind of fuzzy, but you might remember your first day of middle school, your first day of high school, your first day of your first college class. Can everybody remember your own first day of something? Your first day on a job, for that matter. Can you remember your first day? Give me a check for a yes, X for no. Got a couple of you. All right, give everybody a chance to respond. All right, in the chat box, give me words that describe what that first day was like. What do you remember about it? And especially emotions. It was exciting. You were nervous, anxious, unsure. You got to wear new clothes, so that was probably exciting. That made you happy. You were nervous. You didn't know what to expect. It was a new challenge. You were scared. A lot of the fear, the anxiety, the nervousness, the uncertainty comes from exactly what Lisa said, not knowing what to expect. And you may have a combination of feelings. You may feel nervous and also excited. You may feel some sadness, but also, looking forward to what's happening and what's coming. But in all cases, or most cases, that first day has some stress to it. Okay, that's nice. I've been talking for a while, and I haven't had the microphone on. So let's pick this up. You gave a lot of good reasons and a lot of good ideas as far as consistency. And really, Lisa hit on the key that kind of ties them all together, which is not knowing what to expect. The fact that you didn't know what to expect, you didn't know where your room was, what your teacher was going to be like, where you had to hang your stuff up, who your friends were going to be and how they were going to act, and all of those kinds of things. But when you don't know those kinds of things, you feel a lot of stress. Now, if you were to imagine your 35th day of that same school year, it would be a lot more difficult to do unless you look back at a calendar and discover that that was the day that you went on the field trip, or that was the day of a big test or something like that. The reason you don't remember your 35th day, even though you remember your first day, is because by that time you have a routine, you know what to expect, and hopefully things have been consistent enough that you feel much more relaxed and much less anxious. And so this predictability, this consistency minimizes stress. Having a consistent environment, consistent routines, consistent expectations also strengthens brain connections and makes kids both more confident in themselves and more competent in doing things for themselves. So all of these are important reasons why children need consistency. The other thing that's good about consistency is that having predictability and having limits help children learn to regulate their own behavior. And so that self-regulation really contributes to children's ability to do things for themselves, to manage their own stress, and to be successful in life. So having that consistency and providing that consistency is important. I want to share a couple of specific stress reduction strategies that you can use and share with children, including young children. And then I want to talk a little bit about how you can do some of these things to help children who are experiencing stress. So there are lots of specific stress reduction strategies that work with children. Art activities, sensory activities, playing with Play-Doh, playing in water, playing in sand, being physically active, getting enough sleep, using music, using humor, all of those kinds of things can help to reduce immediate stress. And again, help that stress response to return to something approaching a more normal level. The two that I want to highlight especially, one is children's literature. There are a number of outstanding children's books that help children learn how to deal with some of the stresses that they deal with. And the cover that's on this slide is one of my current favorites. It's called The Invisible String, and it's a story explaining to children about how they are connected with people who are important to them, even if those people aren't physically there. It's a great kind of book for children whose grandparents live a long way away or other family members live a long way away. We've used it a lot with children who have a parent deployed in the military, helping them to understand that mom or dad, even though they're a long way away, are still going to be thinking about you and still care about you. There's even a line about the invisible string connecting you to Uncle Brian who's up in heaven. So it deals in a very minimal way, but it at least mentions the idea that even when somebody dies, you still have that connection with them. There are lots of good books that help to reinforce these kinds of things, help children learn how to deal with stress. This is one that I especially like. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about some deep breathing exercises. All of you know that taking deep breaths, doing deep breathing, meditation, and the breathing that goes with meditation, yoga, those kinds of things make a difference in immediate stress levels. If you are stressed out, people always say, take a deep breath. It actually makes a difference in that physiological stress response. So some specific ways that you can teach children how to do deep breathing, because just take a deep breath is sometimes not enough information for children in terms of what they do and how they do it. This picture here shows a little girl using a prop that we call the fire-breathing dragon. And this is a homemade prop. As you can see, it's a paper cup or plastic cup attached to a popsicle stick to hold it, and there are red streamers taped to the inside of the cup and some eyes on top. So this is the fire-breathing dragon, and what you teach children is when you're feeling stressed, you breathe in some air, you hold the dragon next to your mouth, you breathe out really hard, and what you want to do is make the streamers flow so that you can see the fire coming out of the dragon's mouth. Get children to repeat that several times, and it has that same deep breathing effect. Another one that is incredibly easy to teach, and you can teach even to very young children, give them a flower, a real flower, an artificial flower works just as well, and give them a birthday candle. If you're working with young children, don't light the birthday candle, but just give them to them as props. And so you can teach them that when you breathe in deeply, it's like smelling the flower. So you hold the flower up, and you breathe in. And then when you breathe out, it's like blowing out the birthday candle. So you breathe in, smelling the flower, you breathe out, blowing the candle, and so on. And it's, again, a very easy way to make this concrete for children. And that deep breathing can make a difference. There are also a couple of examples here of hands-on activities, coloring to music, journaling. Journaling works for young children as long as you don't have expectation that they're going to necessarily write narrative text that you can read and understand. But giving children a chance to write in whatever way they want to draw pictures of what's causing them stress, or to write about or draw pictures of things that make them happy, things that relieve their stress, can be useful. Coloring to music, having soothing music, having exciting music, and then lots of sensory materials. Mixing cornstarch with water is a very simple one that can help to reduce that immediate stress level. So key points about the brain and stress. We know children's brains are wired by experiences, and part of what's important about the limbic system is that the experiences children have of stress help to wire their brains and wire that limbic system, even if they are not old enough to remember them later. So there is no No such thing as, oh, it's okay, he's not going to remember this stressful experience anyway. It will show up in the child's behavior even if the child does not consciously remember it. So difficult behaviors, when you see a child who's acting difficult, think first of whether that child is under stress. Those of you who have children of your own know when children are hungry, when children are tired, when children are angry, when children are upset, their behavior tends to be to deteriorate and to be more challenging. We see this in the extreme with children under stress. You see tempers, withdrawal, regression to earlier behaviors, extreme aggression, all of those things. And when children are under this stress, it doesn't do any good for them to get in trouble for these difficult behaviors because they're not responding logically. What they need first is an opportunity to deal with the stress before you try to help them deal with the longer-term consequences of the behaviors. Also remember that an absence of response can cause stress just as having a response can cause stress. So being neglected, having a parent who is depressed and doesn't respond can be just as stressful as being physically or emotionally abused. Adults can help mitigate stress, and we do this primarily through relationships. It's also important to remember, though, that building those relationships takes time and patience. And the time that you spend building relationships with young people that you're working with, or the time that you teach parents to spend building relationships, or child care providers to build relationships, or 4-H camp counselors to build relationships, that all of that makes a big difference in terms of helping those kids deal with stress. This quote is one that I really like. It comes from one of the leading child trauma researchers, Dr. Bruce Perry. When you look at children who come out of terrible environments and do well, you find someone in their lives who somehow instilled in them the attitude that they aren't helpless, that they aren't powerless, that they can do something. So we're right up at the end of our time, but I want to spend just a minute or so having you all think about how you might be able to use this information. And I see a typo in my slide. What I'm asking here is, how could this information on stress influence your extension programming? What might you include? What, in addition to teaching this information directly to people, how else might this influence what you teach in terms of your extension programming? And then I've got a couple of resource links I want to quickly share, and we'll wrap this up. Helping you help 4-Hers make better decisions, absolutely. Being able to be more understanding. And if there's one sort of basic thing that I would hope you would get out of this, it would be that, to be more open-minded about why kids are misbehaving or why teenagers are misbehaving, to understand that sometimes it is not something that they're just doing to drive you crazy. Now, sometimes it is, but sometimes it's a response to stressors that they can't deal with. Certainly providing resources for child care providers, many of whom don't know this and need to know how important this is. A child care version and a parent version of this information would be great. If any of you are interested in helping develop these kinds of things, particularly anybody who's been through Better Brains for Babies training or who is interested in going through it, would love to talk with you. Send me an email and I'd love to talk with you about doing this. The activities are important. There are lots and lots of others in an hour and in an online format. There was only so much that I could highlight, but there are lots of other kinds of activities that you can do and teach to help children cope with stress. Other thoughts, other topics that would be helpful. Still see a couple people typing. I want to give you a chance to respond. 4-H agents could benefit from this. That's great. And there may be some other opportunities either for you to share this with them. Those of you who are 4-H agents could certainly share it with other 4-H agents. Those of you in the office with somebody who's a 4-H agent could share it. Or we can certainly plan something else if you think that this kind of training specifically for them could be useful. Staff meetings, absolutely. The basics of stress response and how stress affects us are exactly the same for adults as they are for children. So thinking about the stresses that you're facing at work or that others in your office are facing, the same kinds of responses are happening to them as well. So that's something to remember. A good refresher right before students go back to school is another great idea. I don't want to keep you forever, so I am going to pull up a slide that has some links to some resources related to toxic stress. I will also email all of you a copy. I'm going to clean it up and take out the typo that I found, but I will email you a copy of these slides. And these links will be in there as well. I've also got a very simple handout that I've used with child care providers with some simple stress management kinds of strategies. And so I will send that to you as well. And as I said, I'd love to talk about how we take these kinds of things and make this into something that we teach others as an extension program. This is an area, as Lisa mentioned, this is an area where it's a hot topic. It's an important topic with a lot of kids and a lot of families being under stress. And so I would love some more help and some more people who are interested in helping get this out. So quick photograph of me in case you forget what I look like, although my hair's longer than that now. Feel free to contact me if you've got ideas. I'm going to stop the recording, and then I will stay on here for a minute and be glad to answer other questions, take other ideas, and hopefully this will not be the end of this conversation. I appreciate you all being here.